Hello and welcome to the mill. I am your host, Dusty Crane, and this week there's not a whole lot of new news going on, but we do have a little bit of something, in my opinion, that's exciting to talk about. I think it was Tuesday last week, Jamie just randomly, casually waltzed into the Scythe Facebook group and tossed us a bomb in the room and left. And that bomb was, he goes, I'm not really considering it, but I would entertain the possibility of doing another game in the Scythe world. And if you are a Scythe fan, like I am a Scythe fan, then this long period of hopelessness, I guess, where Jamie said, all right, after the modular board, there's nothing new, no expansions, no promos, no accessories, no anything outside related. This is the end of Scythe. And then for him to come out and say, in quoting, to say, I'm slightly open to making another game in the Scythe world. If so, what game would you like to see? And it was actually an open poll question. So, there's going to be all kinds of crazy ideas out there, but one of the things that came up was, obviously to be expected, was Scythe 2, and they wanted a map in America instead of Europe. But the top two options in that poll were Scythe, a deck building game, and Scythe Duel, a two-player version of Scythe. And so I thought we'd kind of talk around those possible ideas for a few minutes here. Now, I've been playing a lot of Marvel Champions lately. That's a new LCG by Fantasy Flight Games. And so that was kind of one of the things that Jamie had mentioned he kind of elaborated on what a deck building game could look like in the Scythe universe on his Wednesday Facebook live stream. And it was more to the effect of Fantasy Flight's LCG method, which, if you're unfamiliar, you probably are if you're watching this channel, but if you're unfamiliar, it's basically an expansion. To stick with the Marvel Champions analogy there, there's a Captain America pack coming out. And so if I want to add Captain America to my deck, I go and I buy this expansion, and I have, 40, I think it's 40 cards, 60 cards, I don't know what's in an expansion typically, but my deck of Captain America will be the same as your deck of Captain America if you went out and got it, or anyone else's. So it's not like Magic the Gathering or, I think, Pokemon. I'm not too familiar with other collectible card games, but those ones that have random elements where you open a pack, and if you and I both bought a pack, we'd have two completely separate or different pack contents, most likely. So the LCG model is completely static. You know what you're getting, 1 through 40, and everyone else, if they want to add that to their deck, they get the same thing. So that's kind of the model that Jamie would be looking at if he considered doing a deck building in the Scythe world. But he did say he's toying with the idea. Someone asked elsewhere, like in the live chat, would you consider doing a deck building game? And this was a part from the conversation about Scythe. And he said he's toying with the idea of one. And so I'm trying to think of, in terms of a core box, like I think it's typically the case that you would have 1 or 2 or 3 playable factions right off the get-go, and then you'd have an enemy or a scenario or something like that, or several scenarios that you could play out. And I think Scythe kind of already naturally has a nice, layout in terms of the way Marvel Champions works is, on one side you have your superhero, and on the other side you have your alter ego, and then you also have allies. And so if you're Spider-Man, you might have an ally of Black Cat or something like that. And if you're another superhero that has, a sidekick, then, that would be, similar. I'm totally drawing a blank on superheroes right now, which is funny, but It is what it is. We'll say Batman and Robin. We're going completely away from Marvel, moving over to DC. But the way that could work with Scythe would be that you would have your hero character that we're typically used to having in the game that you see on your character piece, and then you could also have an ally of your animal companion. And that was another thing that had come up in the live chat. Was Jamie said he's toying with the idea, or he's working on a game design that includes pets or companions. Now, my initial gut instinct was that probably ties into Codename Wild, which I think most people consider most likely his open world exploration co-op game. It would make sense that you could have, an animal companion that can maybe go out and, I don't know, hunt for you or gather resources, or else just, maybe help you if there's combat or conflict of some sort. But in the event of a collectible card game, that could still work too, in that, you have your player and you have your animal, and you could actually see some additional functionality there, as opposed to it not really serving a purpose inside. It's just a cool looking mini where you have a character and an animal companion. So that is certainly one way you could go in a Scythe deck building game. People asked for, or Jamie had asked, what else do you think that might look like? And me not having a whole lot of familiarity with LCGs, I didn't have, really anything to bring to the table aside from what I just mentioned. But the other thing that came up was Scythe Duel, and Jamie had mentioned that, there's Seven Wonders and then Seven Wonders Duel, and they play similarly enough, but there's also quite a few differences. And in terms of Scythe Duel, it would be a 2-player game, which is typically outside of Stonemeyer's usual offerings, but I think the Scythe license lends itself, is strong enough on its own that I think, maybe you can go ahead and take some chances with what your studio typically does, just based on the strength of the IP. But Scythe Duel, a 2-player version, what might that look like? So I don't think you necessarily just want a smaller map, because we can kind of pull that off with the modular board. I think there has to be something else, and I don't know if maybe that something else is maybe breaking off the hero character and breaking off the animal companions to have different abilities, or if it is less movement on hexes, and maybe there's more card usage similar to Seven Wonders Duel. But then I wonder if you move too far away from what Scythe is, and I know we just talked about deck building, but I wonder if you're going to do something like that where it's a 2-player game, if you move too far off that Scythe recipe, is it still Scythe? And can you make it feel enough like Scythe while catering to just a 2-player experience? And so I'd certainly be up for it. I've mentioned before that a lot of my games of Scythe are 2-player games, so I would really be interested in anything that Jamie found worthy enough of the IP and worthy enough of his studio to break kind of that mold and go off in a different direction. I think if he found that, I guess, magic combination that made him say, okay, we're going to go ahead and make a 2-player game, I think there's probably a very good chance that it's going to be well worth our while. Some of the other ideas that came up on the poll were Scythe 2, like I mentioned, America. One of them was Scythe War Game, to get those mechs what they're meant to do instead of commuting. And so instead of just, posturing for war, just maybe we get to act out what happened before. Maybe we get to act out the Great War, and we're playing more of a kind of a dudes on maps or mechs on maps kind of game. I guess similar, it kind of ties in. The next option was Scythe the Prequel, with mechs that can be assembled with different parts for different skills. So kind of a modular mech instead of a modular board. Maybe you want to go ahead and make this like a light mech, and then it can move faster and further. Or maybe you want a mech that is going to go heavy into the warfare, and so you really want him armored up, and maybe he's slow. To me, that kind of has like a BattleTech vibe, which with the Scythe IP, I think that could be super cool. I do think we probably veer away from what Scythe is today and maybe actually steer it right into one of the misconceptions that people often have about Scythe in that it is more combat heavy. So I think there's certainly an interesting possibility there. Some of the other options that came up were Scythe the dice game, custom dice, probably simultaneous play. Jamie has talked about liking some of these roll and writes, and I know they're kind of hot right now, or maybe it's starting to pass us by a little bit, but maybe still relevant enough that there's some interest there. I know at one point there was some fan modules being made, and so that was another one that came up. Of the ones that I mentioned, what sounds the most interesting to you? I think for me, I do like the idea of the Scythe deck building game, but I think you kind of limit yourself to the factions that we already know. And of course, that can grow. I mean, it's the world of 1920 plus is a big universe, so there is a possibility for us to learn about even more factions than Jakob has previously shown us here with Scythe. But I think for me, Scythe Duel is what particularly sounds the most interesting, but not just Scythe on a smaller map. I'd be interested in seeing what Jamie could do to change the game up to a two-player game and it still be Scythe, or at least a variant that still feels very true. So that poll, it kind of got the gears turning. It kind of got me hopeful again, that even though we knew that Jamie had said, this is the end of Scythe, I think we kind of hoped, I know I kind of hoped that something would come along that would make him reconsider. I think Scythe is a very important, influential IP to Stonemaier Games. I think right now, at least, these two are very, and maybe Wingspan has kind of taken a little bit of that with how successful that has been, and rightfully so, but I still think of Stonemaier and Scythe side by side. Like, these are very important, interlocking pieces. And so I didn't like the idea of this was it, but I certainly understand Jamie wanting to get away from that and do other things. So that possibility certainly has me excited. A few other things of note this week that I jotted down were, if you aren't able to watch those Stonemaier videos, the live casts that are on Wednesdays, if you have a long commute and you want to listen to it, Joshua Heiser has been making the Sunday or the Wednesday live chats and Jamie's Sunday sit-down videos available in podcast format. So if you have a podcast app that you like, just go ahead and type in Stonemaier and you should be able to find it. I found it on Overcast just fine. Another thing that Jamie brought up in the Wednesday live stream, or actually maybe it was, no, I think it was in that, Wingspan, the European expansion, has shown up on Tabletopia. I was just looking at it before I started filming. I couldn't find where I could buy the DLC from Steam and just say, okay, well, now I own Wingspan EE. Like, it seems like it's still, this one right now at least, is tied to their premium subscription, so I think that's a minimum of $5 a month if you wanted the European expansion. You can still buy Wingspan outright and play that and invite your friends to play that without any kind of monthly reoccurring, but right now, at least from what I could see, it looked like it was a monthly subscription to Tabletopia kind of benefit right now. It might just be waiting to end up in the Steam shop. I'm not exactly sure how that works. That is all I have for you this week. I hope you guys have a great one. Take care of yourselves and each other. Thanks for watching. Bye.